That morning, Robert Caldwell slapped his daughter hard enough that the sting stayed long after the sound faded. Alexandra Caldwell did not cry or shout. She stood still, eyes steady, as if movement might make the moment real. Across the room, her brother Matthew Caldwell stared past her toward the window, studying the gray sky like it offered answers. "You always do this," Robert snapped, adjusting his cuff. "You push until there's conflict." Alexandra swallowed. "I asked a question," she said quietly. Matthew shifted his weight. "You didn't have to challenge him," he muttered. "You know how he is." The silence that followed felt heavier than the slap itself. By evening, Alexandra cooked as she always did, precisely, beautifully. Beef Wellington rested beneath a crisp truffle crust. Potatoes shimmered with herb butter. Robert lifted his glass. Matthew smiled and said, almost fondly, "Finally, she understands her place." Robert nodded, satisfied. What neither man noticed was Alexandra's calm. It was not surrender. It was calculation. Before I continue, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from today. Your one click really helps support the channel. 3 weeks earlier, Alexandra's life had looked very different. At 5:30 a.m., she woke in her Boston apartment to the quiet hum of the city and the comforting rhythm of routine. Coffee brewed while project files covered her kitchen table, structural load reports, seismic models, cost projections. The Harbor Point Tower was a $4 to $7 million project, and she led it. That morning, her managing director called. "Alexandra, the board approved it," he said. "Senior structural engineer. Effective immediately." She closed her eyes, letting the weight of 6 years of work settle into pride. She called her father. "I was promoted," she said. Robert paused. "Good," he replied flatly. Then, without warmth, "You need to come to Cape Cod next weekend. Family issue. Don't be late." The line went dead. Alexandra stared at her phone, realizing she could not remember the last time her father had asked about her life. The imbalance had always been there. When Matthew closed a modest real estate deal 2 years earlier, Robert bought him a condo in Back Bay. When Alexandra earned authority over decisions worth 10 times that amount, she received silence. Holidays followed the same script. Matthew sat with Robert, whiskey in hand, discussing markets and connections. Alexandra worked the kitchen, serving, cleaning, disappearing. On Friday night, she packed for Cape Cod, telling herself this visit would be different. In her desk drawer sat an unopened envelope from Lockwood & Associates, dated years earlier. She assumed it was old paperwork tied to her mother's estate and ignored it. The drive took just over 2 hours, each mile tightening a familiar knot in her chest. At work, people listened when she spoke. At home, she rehearsed how to shrink. As Alexandra crossed the Sagamore Bridge, her phone buzzed. "Where are you?" Matthew asked. "Dad's waiting. Don't make this difficult." "What does he want?" she asked. "You'll see," Matthew replied, ending the call. The radio filled the silence. A news segment mentioned federal investigations into Boston investment firms, market manipulation, insider trading. Alexandra barely listened. When she arrived, a black Mercedes sat in the driveway, its vanity plate unfamiliar. Inside, the house smelled of Polish and old decisions. Robert waited in his study, seated behind the desk passed down through generations. A thin man in a charcoal suit gathered his papers as she entered. "We'll finalize everything Monday," he said to Robert. "Just need the signature." After he left, Alexandra asked, "Who was that?" Robert slid documents toward her. "What I need from you." Alexandra read the papers carefully. Second mortgage. $1,200,000. Trustee authorization required. "Why do you need my signature?" she asked. Robert's jaw tightened. "Just sign." She noticed something wrong, a name crossed out, replaced with hers. "This says I'm the trustee," she said. Matthew stepped closer. "Alex, don't do this," he warned. "Dad's under pressure." "$1 million isn't pressure," she replied. "It's risk." Robert slammed his hand on the desk. "You don't question me." Alexandra placed the papers down. "I need time." Robert's voice dropped. "Sign tonight, or don't come back." Alexandra met his gaze. "Then I'll answer tomorrow." In that moment, something old cracked, and something stronger took its place. That night, Alexandra barely slept. The house was quiet in the way only expensive homes could be, no creaks, no comfort, just silence polished smooth by money. At dawn, she came downstairs with notes she had written carefully, each question measured, unemotional. Robert sat in his armchair, already dressed, as if waiting for trial. Matthew stood behind him, arms crossed. I reviewed the documents, Alexandra began. The interest rate is unusually high, and the trust authorization. Enough, Robert interrupted. He stood abruptly. You are not my lawyer. I'm the one being asked to sign, she replied. Then do it without interrogation. Alexandra took a breath. I can't. The slap came fast and loud, the sound echoing against wood and glass. Alexandra stumbled but stayed upright. She looked at Matthew. For a moment, she waited. He said nothing. Finally, he murmured, if you weren't so stubborn, this wouldn't happen. Robert straightened his jacket. Sign today or leave, he said. Alexandra touched her cheek, already burning. I need time, she said quietly, and walked upstairs without permission or apology. In her childhood bedroom, nothing had changed except her. The floral wallpaper peeled at the corners, frozen in a version of her life that had never belonged to her. Alexandra sat on the bed, hands shaking, then remembered the envelope. She pulled it from her bag, heavier than paper should be. Inside were legal documents, neatly ordered. The cover letter was addressed to her by name. You are the sole trustee. Her breath caught. She read it again. And again. The house was not her father's. It never had been. Her mother had placed it in an irrevocable trust years earlier. Alexandra called the number listed. This is Alexandra Caldwell, she said. I need to speak with Catherine Lockwood. Minutes later, the truth was confirmed. Your father tried to change the trust 6 months ago, Catherine said. He had no authority. Why didn't you tell me? Alexandra asked. Your mother instructed discretion, Catherine replied gently. Alexandra sat back, stunned. 12 years of obedience. 12 years of shrinking. All built on a lie her mother had already planned for. Alexandra searched the house for her mother's old laptop and found it buried in a closet, the password unchanged. Her inbox held years of quiet fear. Emails to Catherine spoke of gambling, secrecy, and desperation. He will try to take the house, her mother had written. Promise me you won't let him. Alexandra wiped her eyes and turned to the radio news she had ignored earlier. Federal investigations. Market manipulation. A name surfaced, Langston Capital Group. Her phone rang. Ms. Caldwell, a woman said. My name is Victoria Langston. We need to talk about your father. They met the next morning at a cafe near the water. Victoria didn't waste words. Your father destroyed my company in 2019, she said. He made millions. We nearly collapsed. She slid documents across the table, trading logs, wire transfers, a casino marker. His nearly $1 million in gambling debt, Victoria added. That mortgage he wants? It's desperation. Alexandra stared at the evidence. Why tell me? She asked. Victoria met her gaze. Because the government needs a witness. And because I want justice. Alexandra returned home wearing calm like armor. I'm still thinking, she told Robert. Give me until Friday. He agreed, impatient but hopeful. The pressure escalated. Robert called her firm, suggesting she was unstable. Matthew warned, if Dad falls, we all fall. On Thursday, an email arrived from Andrew Coleman, assistant U.S. attorney. We need him to reveal intent in front of witnesses. Alexandra met Andrew in Boston the next day. We can prosecute without you, he said honestly. But juries believe what they see. The plan formed around one thing Robert valued above all else, image. A family dinner. Public. Controlled. Invite his partners, Andrew said. Let him think he's winning. Alexandra nodded. That night, she called her father. I'll sign, she said. But I want a family dinner. Like Mom used to host. Robert's relief was unmistakable. That's my daughter, he said. Matthew called later. I knew you'd come around. Alexandra smiled at the phone. I understand my place now, she said, meaning something very different. In the days leading up to the dinner, Matthew watched her closely. He asked questions that pretended to be casual. He searched her room when she was gone. Alexandra noticed everything and said nothing. The night before the dinner, she sat alone in her mother's room, Trust documents spread across the bed. She wrote a single sentence on a folded page. This is not revenge. This is truth. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Catherine Lockwood arrived early, her face tense. Your father hired a lawyer to challenge the trust, she said. Tomorrow is your window. Alexandra nodded. Then tomorrow it is. Downstairs, the table was already set for 11. Candles. Crystal. Witnesses. Alexandra stood in the doorway and felt fear rise, then settle. She was no longer trying to be agreeable. She was preparing to be exact. The house that had once made her small now felt like a stage. And for the first time, Alexandra Caldwell knew exactly where she would stand. The evening of the dinner arrived with deceptive calm. Robert Caldwell moved through the house like a man preparing for a victory lap, issuing instructions to the caterer and correcting the placement of wine glasses. Details matter, he said, straightening a napkin. Matthew hovered nearby, restless. You're sure she's signing tonight? He asked. Robert smiled. She knows better now. Alexandra listened from the staircase, her expression unreadable. Guests began to arrive just after 7. Edward Montgomery shook Robert's hand warmly. Good to see you back in form, he said. William Prescott followed, already discussing markets. Alexandra greeted them politely, offering wine, playing her part. When Victoria Langston arrived, Robert's charm sharpened. An investor interested in family property, Alexandra explained. Robert nodded, pleased. Catherine Lockwood arrived last, briefcase in hand. Paperwork, Robert said dismissively. Alexandra caught Catherine's eye. She gave a barely perceptible nod. Everything was in place. Dinner unfolded like a performance Robert had rehearsed his entire life. He held court at the head of the table, telling stories of deals and dominance. Matthew laughed at the right moments, refilling glasses, leaning close to his father. Alexandra spoke little. When the main course was served, Robert raised his glass. To family, he announced. And to loyalty. Matthew added, and to Alexandra, for finally understanding what matters. Alexandra lifted her glass but did not drink. Her pulse was steady. Before anything else, she said, standing. The room quieted. Robert smiled indulgently. You want to say something before you sign? Yes, Alexandra replied. I want everyone to understand exactly what I'm being asked to sign. Matthew frowned. Alex, sit down. She didn't. She reached beneath her napkin and placed a document on the table. This is the trust that controls this house. Robert's smile thinned. That's unnecessary. Alexandra looked at Catherine. Would you explain? Catherine stood. The trust was created by Margaret Caldwell in 2012. Alexandra Caldwell is the sole trustee. Murmurs rippled around the table. Edward Montgomery leaned forward. Robert, is that true? Robert forced a laugh. A technicality. Alexandra shook her head. You tried to mortgage a house you don't own. Matthew pushed back his chair. What are you doing? Alexandra met his eyes. Stopping you from lying. She turned to Andrew Coleman. Now would be a good time. Andrew rose, removing a badge from his jacket. Robert Caldwell, he said evenly. You are under arrest for securities fraud, market manipulation, and money laundering. The room erupted. Glasses tipped. Chairs scraped. Robert stared at Alexandra, disbelief curdling into rage. You planned this, he whispered. You humiliated me. Alexandra's voice was calm. You did that yourself. Federal agents entered as Robert was handcuffed. Matthew froze near the doorway, panic flashing across his face. This is insane, he said. She's destroying everything. Andrew read Robert his rights while Victoria Langston spoke softly. In 2019, you took millions from my company, she said. Tonight, you face consequences. Robert didn't resist, but his eyes never left his daughter. Your mother would be ashamed, he said. Alexandra stepped closer. She's the one who protected me from you. The agents led Robert out through the front door. The guests scattered quickly, whispers trailing behind them. Only Matthew remained. He looked smaller now. You went too far, he said. Alexandra met his gaze. You watched him hit me. Catherine stepped forward. The trust includes a clause, she said. Any beneficiary who supports abuse is removed. Matthew's face drained of color. You can't mean, I do, Alexandra said. Silence settled over the house after Matthew left. Alexandra stood alone at the table, candles burning low, food untouched. The performance was over. The truth remained. 3 days later, headlines followed. Prominent investor arrested at family dinner. Robert was denied bail. Matthew lost clients within weeks. Alexandra stayed in the house, learning how quiet could feel when it wasn't enforced. One evening, she stood on the deck, watching the tide roll in, and felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Not triumph. Not relief. Peace. Her phone buzzed. A message from Victoria Langston. "When you're ready, let's talk about what comes next." Alexandra typed back. "I'm ready." She stepped inside, closed the door, and for the first time in her life, locked it without fear. The weeks after the arrest moved with a strange double rhythm, public chaos and private stillness. Robert Caldwell's arraignment dominated business headlines. Former partners distanced themselves quickly, issuing carefully worded statements about unfortunate revelations. Bail was denied after prosecutors cited offshore accounts and gambling debts. Alexandra attended none of it in person. She followed the updates from her kitchen table, coffee cooling beside her laptop, reading court filings with the same focus she once gave engineering drawings. Matthew's collapse was quieter but no less brutal. Clients stopped returning his calls. Deals stalled, then vanished. One evening, he left her a voicemail thick with anger. "You ruined everything," he said. "People won't even meet with me." Alexandra deleted the message without replying. Silence, she was learning, did not always mean weakness. It could also mean finality. At work, colleagues treated her differently, not with pity, but with a cautious respect. Word had traveled. During a meeting, her managing director said quietly, "If you need time, take it." Alexandra shook her head. "I'm fine," she said, surprising herself with how true it felt. The structure of her days returned. Calculations, meetings, decisions. Outside the office, the house remained hers. She walked its rooms slowly, noticing details she had never allowed herself to claim. Ownership felt unfamiliar, almost unreal, but it did not feel wrong. 2 weeks later, Matthew asked to meet. Alexandra hesitated before agreeing, choosing a neutral cafe near the harbor. He arrived late, dressed down, the confidence she'd grown up with stripped away. He stared into his coffee before speaking. "I didn't know it was that bad," he said. "I didn't know about the gambling, or the fraud." Alexandra waited. "I was just following Dad's lead," Matthew continued. "You always were stronger than me." She met his eyes. "Strength isn't silence," she said. "It's choice." Matthew's jaw tightened. "I was scared." "So was I," Alexandra replied. "Every day." He looked away. "Can we fix this?" Alexandra thought carefully. "Not right now," she said. "An apology doesn't undo years of looking away." Matthew nodded, swallowing hard. "So that's it?" "For now," she answered. "If you want a relationship someday, it has to be different." When she left, she didn't feel guilt. She felt clarity. Some structures could be repaired. Others needed to be left behind so something safer could rise in their place. In early summer, Alexandra met Victoria Langston again, this time for dinner overlooking the water. The conversation shifted from the past to possibility. "I'm starting a foundation," Victoria said, "for people trapped by financial abuse. I want you to lead it." Alexandra didn't hesitate. "I will," she said. They called it the Keystone Trust, a quiet acknowledgement that support structures mattered most when everything else failed. Seed funding came from restitution payments ordered by the court. The first client arrived within weeks, a woman with children, depleted savings, and nowhere to turn. Alexandra listened more than she spoke. "I thought I was powerless," the woman said. Alexandra nodded. "So did I," she replied. At the same time, opportunity returned elsewhere. Edward Montgomery called unexpectedly. "I misjudged you," he said plainly. "My firm is breaking ground on a hospital project in Rhode Island. We need someone steady." Alexandra accepted after one night of consideration. The scale terrified her. That told her it was right. Fear, she had learned, often accompanied growth. Renovation of the house began slowly. Alexandra kept the bones intact, the staircase, the windows, the light her mother had loved. She turned the old sewing room into an office. On the deck, she installed a small telescope, honoring a wish her mother never acted on. One evening, Alone, she found a letter tucked inside a drawer. If you're reading this, it began, you found your strength. Alexandra sat on the floor and cried, not from pain, but from release. In court, proceedings moved forward steadily. Alexandra testified briefly, factually, without drama. Watching her father led away in custody felt less like revenge and more like closure. By autumn, the Keystone Trust had helped 5 families begin again. The hospital project broke ground under a pale November sky. Alexandra stood on site as steel beams were set into place, feeling something click into alignment. She wasn't rebuilding to prove anything. She was building because she could. Winter arrived quietly. One early December morning, Alexandra stood in the doorway of the Cape Cod house with coffee warming her hands, watching the sun lift over the Atlantic. Inside, the final trust documents rested beside the Foundation's first annual report. Her mother's photograph hung nearby, pride unmistakable in her smile. Alexandra felt it now. Pride, not borrowed or withheld, but earned. Her phone buzzed with messages from colleagues, clients, and one from Victoria asking about dinner. Alexandra smiled. The road ahead would be demanding, imperfect, human. But it would be hers. She closed the door behind her, not to shut anyone out, but to mark a beginning. The final hearing took place in January, nearly a year after everything began. Alexandra attended quietly, seated behind the prosecution, hands folded, posture steady. When her father was brought in, he looked smaller than she remembered, the authority drained from his voice and shoulders. During a brief recess, he turned toward her. "You didn't have to finish me," Robert said, his tone restrained but bitter. Alexandra met his eyes without anger. "I didn't," she replied. "I stopped protecting the lies." He opened his mouth, then closed it. There was nothing left to argue. The judge returned, the sentence was read, and the gavel fell with a sound that felt final. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited, but Alexandra walked past them without comment. Later that evening, she met Victoria for dinner. "How do you feel?" Victoria asked. Alexandra considered the question. "Clear," she said at last. "For the first time." Victoria raised her glass. "That clarity will change more lives than you know." Alexandra nodded, understanding now that justice was not loud. It was precise. Life settled into a rhythm that felt honest. The hospital project advanced smoothly, her team trusting her judgment without hesitation. At the Keystone Trust, Alexandra sat across from women learning how to rebuild, their stories different but their fear familiar. One afternoon, Claire Morgan called. "You sound lighter," she said. Alexandra smiled. "I stopped carrying what wasn't mine." Claire laughed softly. "About time." On the anniversary of her mother's death, Alexandra returned to the deck at dusk. She read the letter she'd written months earlier and folded it carefully. "I kept the house," she said aloud, as if her mother could hear. "But more than that, I kept myself." The wind carried her words toward the water. She felt no need to ask for forgiveness, approval, or understanding. Some things, she had learned, did not require permission. On a quiet morning soon after, Alexandra stood in her kitchen, sunlight spilling across the floor, blueprints spread beside a mug of coffee. She thought about the woman she had been, the one who stayed silent, who cooked to be accepted, who believed love had to be earned by obedience. That version of herself felt distant now, like an old foundation removed to make space for something stronger. Alexandra closed her laptop, looking out toward the ocean. She was no longer surviving. She was building. If you've stayed with this story until now, kindly subscribe to the channel, like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. Some demolitions don't destroy lives, they finally make room for the right one to begin.